Christina Brown. This is Our Take on Arise TV, a talk show focused on the topics and stories related and of interest to women. And joining me today as my guest co-host is Allison Stamos. Allison is a journalist whose interest in leading a healthy, toxin-free lifestyle was actually sparked by having her first child. She most recently served as managing editor of Natural Child World, a parenting magazine focused on sustainability, design, and creative living for modern families around the world. Thank you, Allison, for being here with us on Our Take today. I know when we spoke earlier, you talked about how when you were pregnant, you wanted to make some real significant changes. How easy or difficult was it to do that?
Well, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed. So what I always think about is, okay, let's start with, say, a room in the house, or, you know, in the case of me, we started with food. So I always think what you put in your body and what you put on your body are probably the two most important things. So with food, I always talk about the Dirty Dozen. The Environmental Working Group is a great group that talks about, because everyone thinks when you buy organic, you have to buy everything organic.
Sure.
And you don't necessarily. It would be great, but that's also not feasible for a lot of people. So we always start with certain foods. There's food that has the really thin skin, like the grapes and the apples, always buy those organic. And then there are other foods that have less pesticides. And that's sort of where I started, and then we kind of went room by room, product by product, and it gets a lot easier once you sort of get in the swing of things.
How long would you say, Allison, it took you to get the entire family on board, your husband on board, and really the household to make all of the changes that you feel like you needed to make?
Well, I like to think we're still a work in progress because it's never perfect. I think, well, we did move during the pregnancy, so that was also a good opportunity to sort of look at the materials in our home, look at the new bed we had to buy, the crib for the baby, and that was part of the transition. So before we made a purchase, that was really easy. I think the tricky part is getting your partner on board.
I bet.
Because you read so much and then you don't want to become that nagging wife that's saying, well, I read this and this is what we should be doing. So I think part of it is learning how to communicate with my husband. We work on that in general.
Which I think every woman can understand and relate to, regardless.
Exactly. So I tried to think, okay, if I would, save up, I wouldn't just try to bombard him with information. I would save up or send him a couple of articles to read at his leisure, and then when he was ready, to make the purchase. And also, when you sort of drop the baby's name, like, well, is this what you'd want for Sophia if you're not sure this is safe? And then he says, okay, fine.
And then he makes the change.
Yeah.
When I first heard about you and all the work and the writing that you've been doing, it made me want to immediately change my diet, stop eating this, stop ordering that. And then I did find myself feeling, like you said, overwhelmed. And I'm curious as to, how difficult it may be to kind of continue. It almost feels like New Year's resolutions, right? When we start off in the beginning, we're gung-ho, we're gonna go to the gym every day, and then before you know it, before the month is up, you're going once a month, if that. And so how do you sustain that energy so that you're always mindful of thinking and, I guess, purchasing in the way that supports this new lifestyle?
Well, I think it's not being so hard on yourself, knowing that not every purchase is going to be perfect, not everything you're doing every day, but if every day you're just thinking about it, that's a good start, because a lot of people don't even know some of the things we talk about. So I'm trying to think about how not to get overwhelmed. It's sort of an interesting, just take it day by day. I really think that is, and you go room by room. Some days you say, okay, this week I'm going to start in the bathroom, and I'm going to go through our shampoo and our conditioner, and I'm going to start. And then it doesn't become a New Year's resolution or a big change. It becomes just a way of life.
And it doesn't feel like a burden.
Right. And then when everyone around you starts to get on board, it makes it much easier.
Makes it much easier. Well, Allison, so happy to have you here with me today. You are in co-host mode, so don't be shy. Feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. And actually with us right now from Cairo is Kimberly Adams. In Egypt, at least 15 people have been killed when shots were fired at supporters of deposed President Mohamed Morsi near the military building where he is being held. The Egyptian military overthrew Morsi last Wednesday following mass nationwide demonstrations led by youth activists demanding his resignation. Well, journalist Kimberly Adams has been watching it all unfold in Cairo. And Kimberly, one of the things that we are very interested in here on Our Take is the role that women have been playing in these demonstrations, but furthermore, the treatment of women. What can you tell us about that, Kimberly?
Well, there are two different ways that women have really been affected by these protests in a way that's different from men. First of all is in their ability to attend these protests, and secondly, in their ability for people like me, journalists, for female journalists to cover the protests. It can be very difficult because there have been a lot of incidents of sexual harassment and assault in some of these demonstrations, particularly the ones happening in Tahrir Square, where there have been more than 100 sexual assaults since these protests got started. Additionally, sometimes those people who are doing these sexual assaults actually target foreign women and journalists in particular for these sexual assaults. And so that is a risk that is available, that's relevant to both foreigners and local women, but it can be particularly heightened for foreign female journalists working here. But then the other side of the dangers of the protests for women are the same dangers for men. The killings that you were talking about this morning, that death toll has skyrocketed up throughout the day to where now the health ministry is reporting at least 51 people were killed this morning in those clashes and hundreds were injured. And so some of those people were journalists, or at least we're getting reports that some local journalists were included.
And Kimberly, I understand that you've actually written extensively about how you are covering the unrest in Cairo. Can you share a little bit about how you have been stifled to some extent because, first of all, you have to make sure that you ensure your own safety?
It does make it difficult, and it means that sometimes I can't tell the story that I necessarily want to tell. So, for example, on June 30th, when there were these really big protests, I wanted to go out and interview people out in the field, out in the demonstrations, but because I knew my security would be at risk, I am a freelance journalist, I don't have a staff backing me up, I ended up embedding with a group of doctors who were being volunteer field medics during one of these protests so that I could be safe. On the day that Morsi was actually pushed out of office by the military, most of the action was happening in Tahrir Square, and I simply just couldn't go. I knew that if I went down there, I was probably going to face sexual harassment and or assault and or worse. There were several reports of gang rapes that were going on there. And so I ended up covering it from an 18th floor balcony at a hotel, which on the one hand gives you sort of a big picture perspective of the size of the crowd and what's going on. You get nice pictures, but you can't really ask people questions or challenge, is this really the best way forward for Egypt, and the kind of things that journalists would like to do. So it can be a little bit difficult.
So Kimberly, what keeps you going? I think a lot of people might say, well, these are difficult conditions, it's very dangerous, you're putting your own life at risk. What makes you stay there and want to keep covering the story?
Well, first of all, I really have a lot of admiration for the other female journalists around me. There are so many women here who do go out in the protests. They have either staff or they have friends who go out with them, and they're out there, really pushing forward and setting the agenda. And the nature of our work is a little bit different, but I take a lot of heart from the women who are out there doing it. But additionally, I think it's important as a journalist who primarily works for American networks to make sure that people back home know what's going on, because Egypt gets $1.5 billion a year from the United States in aid, most of it going to Egypt's military. And so it does affect people in the United States and also people around the world whose governments are involved in Egypt. And I feel like it's our duty as journalists to inform people.
Kimberly, these are obviously very serious crimes that in many ways are clearly holding women back from participating fully in the public life of Egypt. Can you speak as to whether there's been any kind of government response, specifically when you talk about more than 100 or nearly 100 sexual assaults of women demonstrating in these protests?
And that's just in the past few days, not even mentioning previous demonstrations where there have been similar incidents. The government has made some effort, but most activists here, particularly women's rights activists, feel it's mainly lip service. The real difficulty is actually getting prosecutions and convictions of the men who are actually doing these crimes. Sometimes there will actually be videos of these sexual assaults, but no one ever gets convicted, no one ever gets prosecuted, and the women are even publicly shamed in some circumstances, saying, you know, it's their fault because they even were out there instead of being at home. But actually, you know, forgetting what the government is doing, because the government has tried, but given that the government keeps changing so much, it's hard to have a consistent policy. There are a lot of volunteer groups who are really making a difference, groups like Tahrir Bodyguard or Operation Anti-Sexual Harassment, that actually get groups of volunteers together to go out and extract women in the midst of sexual assaults, or simply just to patrol to try and prevent them from happening.
Kimberly, I think the last statistic I saw was about 8 in 498 members of parliament are women. So that's a really small percentage. Is there any discussion about adding women to the conversation for the next government?
Well, it's very interesting. There is no parliament anymore. One of the first actions of the interim president just the other day was to dissolve the last remaining body of Egypt's part of Egypt's parliament, and so now it's kind of up in the air. I mean, there are definitely reports that there will be women involved in this interim government, but as is right now, because of all the violence, because of all the protests, you know, it's really questionable how much this interim government is going to be able to do. Already they're having defections, and the government's less than a week old. There is no active parliament right now because both houses of parliament have been dissolved, and the judiciary has some judges, but it's really hard to see what the role of women is going to be moving forward. But I should say that there are plenty of Egyptian women really out there fighting to make sure their voices are heard.
And Kimberly, that actually leads me to my next question. Given the risk, given the dangers that women face, should they step outside their door and try to participate in these demonstrations, just who then are the women that are out there being vocal, besides, of course, the journalists that are covering what's going on?
I think those women who are out there in the demonstrations and fighting for their political rights are actually coming from across all social spectrums. It's important to remember that the demonstrations that you see on TV coming out of Egypt right now are both for the deposed President Mohamed Morsi as well as against him. And you find women in both of those crowds. The supporters of President Morsi, who primarily come from the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a conservative Islamist group, there are a lot of women at those protests who feel like their vote has been stolen from them because President Morsi was democratically elected in a vote that most of the international community viewed as free and fair. And so you have a lot of women out there saying, you know, even if I'm wearing a niqab, even if I'm wearing the veil, even if I choose to stay at home and, you know, live a more traditional lifestyle, I still have my vote and it still needs to be honored. And what happened was a military coup and it's wrong. Then if you go over to Tahrir Square, where you have the opponents of Mohamed Morsi, there are women out there saying, look, I don't want the Muslim Brotherhood in power. I don't like their social agenda. They're not helping the economy. They're not looking out for women. And I want Morsi out, and I want the military to usher in a new government. So I think it is interesting that despite the risk for attending these protests, you're seeing a lot of women in both camps.
Kimberly Adams with us today from Cairo, Egypt. Kimberly, I can't say thank you enough for not only your coverage, your insight and analysis, but also the risk that you are taking simply by bringing us the story. I certainly hope that you will remain safe, and I certainly also hope that we'll be able to continue to include you in our conversation as things continue to unfold there in Cairo. Thank you again, Kimberly.
Thanks so much.
And we are on Facebook and Twitter. You can always follow us on Twitter by simply going to @OurTakeAriseTV, but you can like and leave us comments on our Facebook page by heading to Our Take on Arise TV. I'm Christina Brown, and you're watching Our Take.
Bigger, stronger, and more domineering than any other. Elephants are the centers of the animal kingdom, but unfortunately today, they're under attack. Tens of thousands are being killed each year just for their ivory. So please, please support conservation and never buy products made from ivory. Because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
24 seconds. That's what you get to make it happen. You can run the break, find the big man inside, or swing it out and hit the 3. Grab the board, and you get a new 24, just like that. But unfortunately, for endangered animals, there's no reset. Many are now facing extinction. And when their clock runs out, they're gone forever. So please, support conservation and never buy products made from these animals. There's no more time to waste.
I came to Africa to see this. But I also found this. Every year, thousands of elephants are being killed just for their tusk. If we buy ivory, we're just helping the poacher. So please, don't do it. Because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Basketball, it's a numbers game. But just listen to these numbers.
1 in 3 adults in this country are at risk of developing diabetes.
1 in 3.
Just think about what that looks like in here. Our families.
Our friends.
Our fans.
Let's change those numbers.
Learn your risk factors for diabetes.
Go to dribbletostopdiabetes.com and take the risk test.
It's fast, free, and easy.
Remember, your health depends on you. To learn more, go to dribbletostopdiabetes.com.
We are discussing the fact that July is African American Bone Marrow Awareness Month, and we certainly want to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter about it. Join the conversation at #OurTakeAriseTV, and remember to leave your comments on our Facebook page, Our Take on Arise TV. Oftentimes, the only treatment for blood-related cancer patients means turning to bone marrow transplants, but for it to work, patients are dependent on finding a donor with a similar genetic makeup. Usually that means someone of the same race. Well, in the Black community, we are having a very, very tough time attracting donors. And as I mentioned, July is African American Bone Marrow Awareness Month, and Jennifer Austin's transplant helped save her life. She is here to help us understand just why communities of color, particularly African Americans, need to join the Be the Match registry as potential marrow donors. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you for
I look forward to hearing more about your story. Also with us, though, is Dr. Allison Hilliard, an OBGYN who is based in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Dr. Hilliard, thank you for being with us here as well.
Thank you for having me.
Jennifer, I want to speak to you first. Your life basically was turned upside down back in 2009. What happened?
So I was the epitome of great health. Exercised regularly, ate well, just lived life as any other, 40-something-year-old woman. And I woke up on a Friday morning with what I thought was a flu-like fever. Couldn't shake it. I went through the weekend, same thing. Went to the ER on Saturday evening. They looked at me, triaged me, told me that I had a virus, like a run-of-the-mill virus. Go home and sleep it off. Take some Advil. I woke up on a Monday morning. 2 days later, I could not see. And that was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Called my family physician. She told me to come in and looked at me. When I walked in, she said, I can't do anything for you. You've got to go to the emergency room at a nearby hospital. For the next, I guess, about 24, 36 hours, they ran a battery of tests. They looked and tried to figure out whether or not I had H1N1. They thought maybe I had HIV. I looked at my husband, do I have HIV? He was like, I don't think you have HIV, you shouldn't. And I didn't. They couldn't figure it out. And then they saw that my white blood counts were so low and my platelets, and they decided to do a bone marrow biopsy. They expedited the tests, and within 2 days, they learned that I had leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. So they put me through a chemotherapy program, a regimen, actually put me into an induced coma because my lungs were shutting down. And over a period of 10 days while in a coma, they gave me chemotherapy. When I came out of the coma, they brought me out. They looked at me and said, if you got a little bit more chemo, we're going to see how this works. About 2 weeks later, they said, looks like you're in remission. but you have a broken chromosome. You have acute myeloid leukemia with a broken chromosome. And that means that the leukemia is likely to return. And when it does, it will likely return with a vengeance. You won the battle, but you did not win the war. You're going to need a bone marrow transplant. And they went on to tell me that I was most likely going to match with someone of the same genetic typing. I have 3 siblings, 3 full-blooded siblings, same mother, same father. They were immediately tested. They matched each other, but they did not match me.
Oh my goodness.
So I had to turn to the bone marrow registry. And at that time, there were better than 8 million people in the registry. Today, there are over 10.5 million. But today, just as then, there were much fewer African Americans, and you're more likely to match someone of the same racial or ethnic typing. And so I needed an African American donor. Today, there's 720,000 in the registry. Back then, there were only about 500,000 plus.
Out of now 10 million.
Out of 10 million. And none of them matched me. They actually found one person who could be a match, but they then couldn't locate that person. So we ran drives. We brought to the registry in 13 weeks over 13,000 people. We're learning that many people are receiving calls for consideration, and they're responding, and we're excited about that. But it was one of those situations where it came out of nowhere. Yeah. I wasn't walking around looking sick. Never thought it could happen to me. I'd heard about, donating your bone marrow, being a part of the registry. But truth be told, I never acted. And then it was time for me to need someone, and I realized people need to act. People need to respond.
Dr. Hilliard, this sounds like a story that probably plays out over and over and over. You don't think you need to participate until you need the services yourself. What have you found as an advocate of bone marrow awareness? What have you found in the African American community that is keeping us from getting involved?
I think one of the things is we're just not aware of the need. I think that blood donation is rampant because blood drives are all the time, whereas bone marrow donations, you don't hear about it as much as you would for blood. Another thing I think in the African American community is there's fear that you're afraid of if it's going to be painful. You're afraid of if it's going to make you sick if you donate. And so I think the biggest thing is that we need to make patients aware and give them education about the process.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about the role of cord blood? Because I know that that's ultimately what worked for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are, as we talked about, over 10.5 million people in the registry. When a Caucasian person is in need of a bone marrow donor, the numbers right now, the stats suggest that 93% of Caucasian people are likely to find a match within the bone marrow registry. Oh. But that number for African Americans is just 66%. So I and many, many other African Americans out there are not going to find a match even if you keep adding people to the registry. We need people to join, to increase, to take that number from 66 to a higher percentage. But there's an alternative to unrelated bone marrow donor transplant, and that is cord blood transplant, the umbilical cord blood of a newborn baby. At the time when children are born, in most instances, that cord blood is just discarded. But now we have private cord blood banking and public cord blood banking, where a parent can come into the hospital and give birth, and if that hospital has a collection on site, that parent can donate his or her, or she can, excuse me, donate her cord blood to the public cord blood bank. If it's a hospital that doesn't have a collection site, then she can request a kit in advance through her obstetrician for her cord blood to be collected. That cord blood can then be stored at a public cord blood bank. And at a certain point in time, if someone has a blood disorder, including cancer, sickle cell anemia, and that baby's umbilical cord blood typing matches that African American, that Caucasian, that Latino, that whomever, then that person can receive that cord blood. Doesn't cost anything if it's a public cord blood bank. It's not painful. And we're talking about cord blood that otherwise would just be thrown in the trash. And cord blood is a more recent form of transplant, but it's working. I received a cord blood in February of 2010. I tell people all the time, 2 African-American baby boys were my heroes, if you will. And it's like legacy begins at birth. And so often, forgive me, but so often I hear people talk about, you know, the issues with black men and how they're not what they should be, or they're not doing what they can be doing. You know, you hear more about juvenile justice issues than you do about the good. And I'm like, my God, African-American children can be heroes at birth if we just donate more of our cord blood.
And if we're only aware.
If we're only aware.
Dr. Hilliard, we heard quite a bit from Jennifer about the cord blood process, but what if you now, you're aware and you want to be a bone marrow donor? What's the first step you should be taking?
Well, you need to, you can go online to bethematch.org and find out where they're going to be doing sampling for to type you to see if you are a match for somebody. And it's just a matter of getting your cheek swabbed, and that DNA is put in through the registry, and they will call you and notify you if you're a match for somebody.
And if I may just add, when you do it, make that commitment and stay committed. One of the troubles that we have sometimes is people get on the registry, they have the best of intentions, and then they don't keep their information about where they're living, their phone numbers current.
Update it.
Sometimes they get a call and they don't respond. If you register, you're creating hope in the life of another individual, another human being. Please, when the call comes, respond. Stay committed. Just remember why you decided to do it at the very beginning. Know that it's pain-free in most instances, and if there is a little pain, it's just for a little bit of time, but you really are helping to save the life of another.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your story, Jennifer Austin, and Dr. Allison Hilliard. Thank you also for being here with us today. Much appreciated. And you are watching Our Take.
Ndingululu Chumsila, mna ndingumama owasindayo kwi-cancer, i-cancer eyayisisibelekweni. Thina bantu, imistake yethu apha ikhoyo, kwawuthiwa umntu une-cancer, simjongela uba laa mntu ngomso uzosweleka. Andizange ndibe nabunzima kakhulu, ngoba into ebangela uba nditsho, eyam yabhaqwa msinyane, ngoba into enyanzelekileyo kuba ube nethemba xa kuthiwa unento. Isapoti endayifumanayo kumyeni wam, kubantwana bam, nefemeli yam yonke. Eyona nto ndandinayo mna entliziyweni yam kukuba okusalayo nam ndizophila ndifane nabanye abantu.
Lo myalezo niwuphathelwe yi-JSI and Livestrong Cancer Anti-Stigma Initiative.
I am Joseph Yobo. Having malaria as a top footballer can be a challenge to my career. This is why I make sure I and my family sleep inside treated nets to protect us from malaria.
My name is Victor Moses. My fellow mate, can you believe? One mosquito net of 1,200 only can save 33,600 naira in 1 year that you would have spent on mosquito sprays.
I am Vincent Enyama. Since my family started sleeping inside treated nets, we don't have to worry about malaria.
My name is Stephen Keshi. Malaria is a serious condition that can destroy the dream of becoming a football superstar.
This makes me a real man. What about you?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
Come on, let's kick malaria out of Nigeria once and for all.
Our Take continues our commitment to profiling what I like to say are our intrepid women travelers. And of course, today is certainly no different. In Kota Kinabalu, Malaysia, are Bihan and Jamie Giffords sailing around the world with their family. And here in New York is Chari Suri, who is certainly no stranger to worldwide traveling, even bringing her toddler, her 1-year-old, with her. Thank you, Charu, for being here with us today, as well as Bihan Bihan and Jamie. You're sailing around the world. You're in Malaysia. How did all of this get started?
Well, it really started when we met. We met through sailing, and it was just a dream that we always had. Later on, when we had our family and had a particularly challenging year that made us examine our priorities and what we wanted and how we wanted our children to grow up, it became an obvious path for us to take, and we put a 5-year plan in place and did it.
How old are the kids now?
Right now, they're 9, 11, and 14. When we left, they were 4, 6, and 9.
So what does school look like for them?
It's pretty interesting, and it varies a lot from day to day. We put our own curriculum together, but we really like them to learn as much as possible from the environment around us. It's such an amazing opportunity that if we can be out exploring and learning from the cultures where we are, instead of sitting back at home on the boat with our heads in books, well, that's probably a good thing.
What are some of the destinations that you've been to, and which ones are your favorite?
Oh, we have this debate often. What's your favorite place? One that really comes back to us over and over is Suaro in the Cook Islands. It's a small atoll, more or less in the middle of the Pacific, where there are no year-round residents, but a couple of park rangers that essentially acted like leaders for us to try to help us understand how you might live by foraging, by living off the land there, and respect the environment of this beautiful place. And the other one is Papua New Guinea, which is a beautiful, fascinating country full of friendly people that unfortunately has some issues in some parts that give it a bad reputation for travelers, but was a wonderful, wonderful place for us to spend time.
You know, Jamie, for a lot of us who find the story of you and your wife and your family just exciting and fun, there is also obviously a safety issue. And I'm just wondering how you feel about being out at sea. I mean, there's the dangers, whether it's weather, whether it's pirates. What are some of the things that you do to just ensure the safety of the family as well?
Well, certainly the first thing is making sure that the boat is kept up and maintained, all of the safety features of the boat, and we talk about different possibilities with the children. We can talk about man overboard or fire on board and things like that. We practice safety with going ashore in the dinghy. Sometimes it's rough, and then in different places where we visit, we make sure we all stick together, that sort of thing. When we're going on a passage to cross between islands, sometimes it's 1 or 2 days, and our longest is 19 days. We look at the weather very carefully because we don't like the idea of storms, and so we really try to avoid them.
So I have a 2-year-old, and I know I'm always thinking about doctor's appointments and visits and checkups. How do you maintain making sure that the family is healthy, and what happens if anybody gets sick?
Well, on one hand, we've been lucky really to have very few health issues. We've been very healthy during the 5 years that we've been out. But the other thing is that we've had good luck finding medical care when we've needed it in any country. And it's usually just finding a recommendation if you need someone. We do have catastrophic health insurance that includes medical evacuation should we need it. But we just pay out of pocket as we go, and every country except the U.S. has been quite affordable.
Exciting, Bihan and Jamie, and we have Chari here, here in the studio with us. And you certainly are no stranger to traveling with the kids. You have a blog site called butterflydiary.com. How is it that having a little one certainly didn't keep you from taking your vacations as needed?
I've always loved traveling. My father, I really thank him and credit him for introducing that love of travel ever since we were three years old, my sister and I. So we've been going everywhere from, I was born in India, so we lived in Africa, I've lived in London, and ever since we were three years old, we were always on the plane, either going to Europe or spending somewhere, or exploring India or on our backyard. But so I've always grown to love travel as education, as an opportunity to learn more about the culture. And I just think that it's wonderful to give that journey and give those gifts that I have experienced to my little girl as well. So Butterfly Diary started as a travel site for me and my husband. We've gone everywhere from China to India to Hawaii. But with Erica, watching her grow and watching her learn and appreciate how she interacts with the world around her has been absolutely a revelation, a learning experience for us. And it's a good way for us to learn how to educate our daughter. She's just turned 1 year old, and she already knows over 50 words, and she goes shopping with me, and she tells me to go buy apples and bananas. So it's kind of really awesome.
I think you told one of the producers that travel has changed for children. I think that people used to talk about traveling once your child is 5 and older, and now it seems like a lot of people, I mean, I have a 2-year-old and we've taken her to Greece and visit friends and family. How has it changed for traveling with young children in terms of the overall package?
I think travel has become much more accessible to either single moms or parents because the whole landscape, people are realizing, especially women are realizing, unless they are happy and they are satisfied, their happiness is not going to translate into good and well-being for their children. So the way that I've seen travel change over the years, a lot of moms are balancing the stay-at-home lifestyle with either short jaunts, either going to somewhere nearby, or even if it's the case of shopping, there's kids sitting. They're not absolutely, leaving the child behind and saying that's the only way for the child to grow up, especially for the first years. So I've seen a lot more infant educational activities crop up in hotels and resorts, and it's almost like new parent travel has become a separate breed in and of itself, which is great.
Bihan, we just heard Chari talk about her 1-year-old already knowing about 50 or so different words. I'm wondering, when it comes to your children and traveling to all of the different countries, what has the language barrier been like, or what additional languages have you and your kids picked up?
Well, we've had the chance to pick up quite a bit of Spanish since we spent almost 1.5 years in coastal Mexico. And then coming across the South Pacific, French was common in a number of the islands that were formerly French possessions. In Indonesia, I actually had lived here as a university student, or lived there as a university student, so I speak pretty good Indonesian and was able to give them some coaching and lessons before we arrived that helped set them up. But as Chari described, it's a wonderful thing to be able to see your children learn by interacting with other cultures. And that was a major motivator for us to kind of pull out of suburban American life and go travel the world.
When
after a period of time,
go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, I was going to say, after a period of time, they learned how to say a perfect g'day mate in Australia.
Very nice, very nice. When I look at the photos of your family in particular, Bihan and Jamie, one of the things that stands out to me, obviously, is that your family is white and you are in these very diverse communities. And I'm curious as to how they have embraced, and also the other communities and cultures, how they have embraced you and your family as not only foreigners, but also just representing a different ethnic group as well.
That's a really interesting question. And I think in most of the places we've been, the strong dichotomy that often exists in the U.S. simply is not present. And so there is less of a perception of us or there's a different perception of us as outsiders, I guess. We're simply foreigners as opposed to white foreigners. Mm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Certainly does. And Chari, I'm wondering, have you felt similar circumstances when you travel to other countries? I mean, obviously the difference is that you're coming from a different ethnic background or different culture. How are you then received?
It's interesting. My child is mixed. The father's Caucasian, I'm Indian. So she looks a little bit, quasi-Indian, quasi-Caucasian, and people always ask us, where are you from? And I think because globalization and travel is becoming more and more the norm, the reception has been wonderful. It almost seems that Erica is becoming more the norm than the exception to the rule, sure. Which is, again, a testament of how people around the world are traveling and therefore understanding other cultures. And to the point that they were saying about speaking languages, since I speak Indian, Hindi, Tamil, we try to interweave as many languages as we can when we speak to her.
All right. You all stick around. We are continuing with our segment about traveling the world. We will certainly be right back, and you are watching Our Take.
Basketball, it's a numbers game. But just listen to these numbers.
1 in 3 adults in this country are at risk of developing diabetes.
1 in 3. Just think about what that looks like in here. Our families.
Our friends.
Our fans.
Let's change those numbers.
Learn your risk factors for diabetes.
Go to dribble2stopdiabetes.com and take the risk test.
It's fast, free, and easy.
Remember, your health depends on you. To learn more, go to dribble2stopdiabetes.com.
There's a lot of hidden dangers out there in cyberspace. Never put your personal information online unless you ask your parents and they say that it's fine. Before you log on, don't be hasty. Please be smart with online safety. Stop and think before your connection. Use these steps for your protection. Online safety.
Stop. Think.
Connect.
I wonder why anyone would do that to themselves. We all need air to breathe, to live, and so does the earth. But we're choking it with plastic bags. Let's stop using plastic bags and give the earth a chance to breathe. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle.
I came to Africa to see this. But I also found this. Every year, thousands of elephants are being killed just for their tusk. If we buy ivory, we're just helping the poacher. So please, don't do it. Because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Our Take is traveling around the world with sailing couple Bihan and Jamie Gifford in Malaysia, and Chari Suri, editor-in-chief of ButterflyDiary.com, and she's also an ambassador of Afar magazine. But also here to share her extravagant travel tales is Nancy Sathry Vogel, author of Changing Gears, A Family Odyssey to the End of the World, and also blogger at familyonbikes.org. Thank you, Nancy, for also being a part of this wonderful conversation. I was just saying during the break that Chari and Bihan, I want to be one of your kids so that I can travel with you guys. But Nancy, you've taken a step further, and you've also written a book about it. First of all, tell us a little bit about the book.
The book is Changing Gears. It's my story. It's a mother's story. We spent a total of 4 years traveling on bicycles with her children. This book is actually 3 years of that as we rode our bicycles 17,000 miles from Alaska to Argentina. And this is a mother's story, including my fears, my concerns, those same fears that any other mother feels for their children.
One of the things I find really fascinating about all of the moms here is the ability to say, I'm going to make travel a priority. I'm going to make it an educational tool for my family and for my kids. And I'm wondering, Nancy, what actually brought you to the point of making this decision? Hey, you know, you could have taken a bike ride around the park, but you said 17,000 miles. What prompted that?
And I wish I could tell you that. My husband came up with the idea, and initially I thought he was crazy. I thought, this is not what parents do. Like, this is just not what a parent would do with their children. And yet, the more he talked about it, the more I realized that it wasn't him that was a crazy one, it was me. I was the one who was getting up early, dropping my kids off at daycare, spending my day as a teacher with other people's kids all day. I'd pick up my own in the afternoon, take them to soccer practice, fix a quick dinner, and collapse into bed exhausted. And yet I did that because it's just what you do. And so finally, when he brought up this idea and I started thinking about it, I realized, you know what, it is possible that we can design our own life, and we can design a life that is in tune with our own desires. And for us, that meant going out on the bicycles and exploring the world.
And Chari, I understand that you actually left your job at an investment bank because this is what you wanted to become, I guess, your full-time job as well.
Absolutely. The whole idea of working 100 hours a week and, you know, not being able to really go out and explore places I was visiting was not something that was innately me. And I said, if I cannot do this in my 20s, I don't know when I'm going to do this. So I decided to take the plunge, and since then it's just been wonderful, because it's about really going and embracing your fears. It's not, there's no solution, there's no formula for success. I think that if you truly love what you do and follow your passions and be, you know, have some perseverance, success is going to come. So I'm very glad to be able to do what I do right now.
Allison brought this up a little earlier in the conversation, Nancy, and I'm curious as to what your response is. When it comes to the doctor's appointments, when it comes to whatever ailments that you and your husband might face, how do you address them when you don't have the comfort of, say, your primary care physician, the clinic, the pediatrician that you've always gone to over the years?
I think it's really important that you realize that in all of those countries, people live there. And those people get sick and they need to go to doctors too. So for 99% of the things that will happen, the local hospital is going to be fine. In Argentina, I had pneumonia, ended up in the hospital for a week with pneumonia. Again, it was fine, it was no problem. There are those more serious times, and I think that's what we all fear. And we had that too when we lived in Ethiopia. My husband's heart went into arrhythmia. We ended up having to do an evacuation up to Israel. And that was scary. That was definitely scary. In the end, he's perfectly fine. Everything worked out. And I think you take whatever precautions you can take, and you figure it out as you're on there. But remember that people live there too.
Sure, sure.
I completely agree with what Nancy said. When I was a little over 6 months pregnant last year, I took a trip to Jordan. And it was extremely hot. It was a beautiful country. I had a wonderful time, but I fell sick. And I couldn't keep anything down for 24 hours, including water. So everyone around me was concerned. And I got taken via ambulance to a hospital. The Jordanian people were exceptionally kind. In 1.5 hours, I was right as rain. And I think it's important to know that you may be initially very scared, especially as a parent with a new child or a young child, to go to another country, but there are people there that do very well, and they have to go to hospitals too. And the care in many countries, apart from the US, is very strong. I've fallen ill in Italy, and I've been right as rain. So I think that's really important to note as well.
Jamie and Bihan, is there a timetable that you have placed on when you say, okay, it's time to pack up and put down roots, for lack of a better word, somewhere for the sake of the kids?
Well, we have a little mantra in our family for this journey, which is that if everybody's having fun and we haven't run out of money, then we should keep going. And so far, we ran out of money once, and we stopped in Australia, and I worked, and that gave us some more savings to live off and go again. And I imagine that we'll rinse and repeat on that for a little while, and I hope for a number of years.
I think that's a pretty good mantra. And Nancy, at some point you decided that you wanted to come back to the States and you wanted to stay home. It's interesting because they're sort of not there yet. What prompted you to come home?
I think we were all tired. We had
it's a lot of biking.
A lot of biking, but just a lot of change. We had lived overseas when the kids were small, and then we spent 4 years traveling on our bicycles. And what I realized is that all of those experiences that my sons had were fabulous experiences, absolutely wonderful. They got to climb on Mayan ruins and go scuba diving with turtles and dancing in carnival parades and the whole 9 yards. So they got lots and lots of experiences. All of that came at a price. Sure. And the price it came at was that they weren't able to be part of a soccer team or be in Boy Scouts and those are all very wonderful things. And so now our philosophy is that we want to give our kids as much as we can, as many experiences as we can. So we've done many years of travel, and that was wonderful. Now what we wanted to do was to give them a chance to put down roots, be part of a greater community. They're involved with FIRST Robotics, which they absolutely love, and they are learning so much from. And they couldn't do that when we were traveling. And so it's all a give and take.
Do you find that your family or your friends, and Nancy, I'll have you go first, were they thinking, Nancy, what are you doing? This is crazy. What was the support network like?
I think for us, and it's very different for every family. Every family is going to be dealing with different pressures depending on the culture within that family and their friends. For us, our families were fine. We had plenty of support. We had lived overseas for many years. And so for us, it really wasn't an issue. I mean, they were fine. It was, for us, the criticism came from random strangers who looked at us and said, oh gosh, you know, these kids should be home, they should be in school. Taking these kids out on the road is not good. So it was more random strangers that criticized us, not our families.
Than the family and friends. What about you, Bihan and Jamie? What were your friends and family saying when you said, we'll be in one country one day, another country the next day, and how we're going to get there is by boat?
Our good friends have been very, very supportive. We did have to go through something of stages of grief with our family, through denial and anger, and come around to acceptance. But they're there now, and they're terrific, and we feel great support from our friends and family at home.
Sounds good.
Chari, I'm curious, when you travel, what is it the thing you think you miss the most about? I mean, everyone's got to miss something when you're home. There's some comfort. Is it a burger? What is it that you miss the most about when you're gone?
My husband and I are both musicians. So he plays the trombone, I play the piano. And every night we, play music live with the child, and we absolutely love that. So it's difficult to take a piano a little bit when you're on the road. So I think the thing that I really miss the most is actually having that routine and that comfort to give. But it's wonderful because many hotels that we've been to, they have that. They have the piano, and we're able to recreate those experiences. So, and we're also vegetarians. My husband's a vegan, I'm vegetarian.
So it's not the burger you'd be missing.
It's not the burger that I'd be missing, no.
Maybe that's what I would miss.
Right. Well, ladies, I cannot say thank you enough for sharing your travel stories, and gentleman, Jamie Gifford and Bihan Gifford, joining us from Malaysia, a family that is literally sailing the world, and Nancy Sathri Vogel, wanted to make sure I get the pronunciation of your last name correct, author of Changing Gears, A Family Odyssey to the End of the World, and also blogger at familyonbikes.org. And of course, Chari Suri, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story as well. And Allison, it was just wonderful to have you back on the show today.
It was great to be here. Good topic.
Yeah, I certainly hope to have you back again. All right, ladies, again, thank you very much. And I'm Christina Brown, and you are watching Our Take.
Ndingululu Chumsila. Mna ndingumama owasindayo kwi-cancer. I-cancer eyayisisibelekweni. Thina bantu, imistake yethu apha ikhoyo. Kwawuthiwa umuntu une-cancer. Simjongela uba laa mntu ngomso uzosweleka. Andizange ndibe nabunzima kakhulu. Ngoba into ebangela uba nditsho, eyam yabhaqwa msinyane, ngoba into enyanzelekileyo kuba ube nethemba xa kuthiwa unento. Isapoti endayifumanayo kumyeni wam, kubantwana bam, nefemeli yam yonke. Eyona nto ndandinayo mna entliziyweni yam kukuba okusalayo nam ndizophila ndifane nabanye abantu.
Lo myalezo uphathelwe yi-JSI and Live Strong Cancer Anti-Stigma Initiative.
always, it has been an awesome show here on Our Take. And of course, it is now time for us to go from Our Take to Your Take. And I want to hear from you, and I want to see what you've been up to online. And so here is what our Twitter friends have been tweeting. Michaela Angela Davis and Key Williams says, "Thank you, sis. So excited to have a full show of forward-moving Black girl convo. Black girls rock." Michaela Angela Davis, image activist, was actually one of our guest co-hosts, and we had a fantastic time having her on the program, in part because we were also able to talk about a documentary called Imagine a Future, a documentary that actually profiles one young lady from Delaware, and it talks about where all the images and all of the perspectives that young girls and young women get about their beauty, what shapes them. And Michaela Angela Davis, not only was she our guest co-host, but she was actually featured in that documentary and was able to provide insight on one of the young ladies who was in the documentary. It's called Imagine a Future. It actually released the beginning of July. So thank you, Michaela Angela Davis, for that Twitter comment. This one coming from Miss Miss Quandiva, that's what that is. Michaela Angela Davis, Girls Inc. NYC, a big whoop whoop, hashtag girl power. I really like that Twitter message. This one coming from Girls Inc. NYC. "It was such a pleasure to be on Our Take Arise TV with Black Girls Code. Great to know there are more organizations trying to get girls involved in STEM." That Twitter message is talking about science, technology, engineering, and math, and Girls Inc. and Girls Code, which are two nationwide organizations that are working very, very hard to get young girls involved in science, technology, engineering, and math courses. It was a lot of fun to have also Theory Cogbill. She was a high school student who is actually part of the Girls Inc. organization, who is a very, very tech and computer savvy young lady. So awesome for that Twitter message from Girls Inc. and Girls Code. This one coming from Uwigo123, sending it out to Our Take Arise TV. "Great show, keep it up, and we will." This Twitter message is coming from Ray Baker Media. He says, "The piece about the humanity of Sabrina Fulton was very good. I was expecting to hear a reference comparison to Mamie Till." Sabrina Fulton, of course, is the mother of Trayvon Martin, and here on Our Take, we have been continuing coverage of the trial of George Zimmerman, the killing of Trayvon Martin, and we did do a special segment that was dedicated to the women of this case, and Sabrina Fulton, being the mother of Trayvon Martin, clearly part of that conversation. Remember, we're online. Join in and leave a comment on Facebook, or you can send us a tweet. But first, I want to leave you with these quick images. Now it's time to take a moment and look at something here on the Our Take team that we consider very special. Today, we visit Hawaii, where dancers are performing the Tahitian dance Ori. Well, this video is a huge hit in the studio. The guys are saying nice. Well, nice to you for watching. Stay tuned. Keep it here on Our Take.